Thank you.
You can't talk over that.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Perry Diggs, and I am the Education and Programs Manager here at the DuSable African American History Museum and Education Center. And so on behalf of our CEO, Perry Ermer, and the rest of our staff, I want to thank you for joining us on this semi-cold day. We've seen colder, and so thank you for braving out. And so you all, just to give a brief introduction, you all are in the Ames Auditorium of one of the oldest African American history museums in the country. So in February, we will be celebrating our 65th birthday. And so Dr. Burroughs, our founder, was an amazing woman. She was an educator, activist, artist, and she started this museum because as an educator, she would often take her students around. Chicago's got a lot of great cultural centers and museums, but often her black students would ask, do we have any history? Do we have any culture? Because they did not see that reflected in the places that they went to. And so she started the museum as the Ebony Museum of Negro History and Art in the living room of her home over on the 3800 block of South Michigan. And then we changed the name 1968 after DuSable. John Baptiste Point DuSable gets a lot of recognition now, but in 1961 and before, not a lot of people knew that Chicago was founded, first non-indigenous settler, by a black man. And so he came here in about 1775, and he sold his property in 1800. If you've ever been on Michigan Avenue by that Apple store there, you'll see a large bust of his, and that's where he established trade. And so in honor for him, that's when we changed the name. So then we've been in here about 1973. This building was first built in 1915. It's been a police lockdown facility. It's been a community center. And then finally, she was able to get it for $1. But she was tasked for building the museum up to what we have today. And so one of the things of her legacy is programs like this. You know, we are lucky to have a lot of physical things, but we know Black's story can't be told, you know, in one building, no matter how big it is. And so we do presentations, we do things online, so I encourage you all to keep looking on our website for other stuff. But we are very excited to have these fine people up here today. You have Seth Neblett, who wrote the book. I mean, how many of you have heard, obviously you've heard of Parliament-Funkadelic if you're here, right? Yeah? Okay, good. Clap for that. Now, I do have a question right off the bat before we get started. In Chicago, we have the Cubs, we have the Sox. And there are some people that say you have to root for both. I'm a Cubs fan. There are others that choose a side. Can you choose a side between Parliament or Funkadelic? Which one you like the best?
No, because they're both the same group.
I get you, but somehow I lean personally more towards Funkadelic.
Yeah.
But I do love Parliament, but I lean more towards. But
Parliament's more dancey, Funkadelic is a little more rocky-ish.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm a Funkadelic man, but we'll leave it at that. But Mr. Neblett wrote this amazing book, Mothership Connected, about the women of Parliament-Funkadelic. And so he is joined with us by our moderator here, Mr. Marcus Chapman, who's a radio host, and he was narrator for TV1's On Some.
No, not the narrator.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was on screen talking. The narrator, that's a guy named Gary Anthony Williams. Yeah, he was the voice who did all of that. I don't have that kind of voice. But I was one of the contributors on screen. I was in 21 episodes, actually. Filmed for 22, but something happened and they couldn't get the tape to the producer.
So now I'm curious, what was the 22nd?
Shirley Murdoch.
Oh, okay.
That was a good one, though.
Yeah. So it turned out good, but I didn't appear in that. But yeah.
But we also have Miss. Thank you for correcting that. We also have Miss Ayanna Contreras. She's the host of Soulful Strut. And then we are.
And I wanted to personally introduce kind of my special guest, I guess. She is one of the 5 women that is featured in Mothership Connected. Her name is Shirley Hayden, and she is
So I was trying to keep my part as short as possible so that we can hand it all over to these fine people, and so enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.
All right. Now, he talked about choosing between Parliament and Funkadelic. I'll be honest, I actually can choose if I have to, because as great as the whole band, the whole organization is, the reality is we would not be sitting here today if it were not for Parliament, because Parliament brought the breakthrough that launched everything. Matter of fact, not just Parliament. See, I had to bring this. It's on the screen, but I had to bring, how many of y'all had this? Okay. 50 years ago this month, this album was released, December of 1975, and it changed everything. Not just, it changed music in general, it changed funk, but in particular for the band, it launched them from just being a band who other bands were scared to have open up for them, to a band who was able to take off and headline and become the biggest band of the decade. Some people say Earth, Wind & Fire, but you know, they were both right. They're like Rolling Stones, Beatles, you know, however you want to choose. But this is the album that changed everything. And we heard some selections from it earlier. You know, P4 Wants to Get Funked Up, Mothership Connection, Star Child, Give Up the Funk, to the Roof of the Circle. This is the album that gave George Clinton the chance to expand beyond what he had been doing before. And it also is the album that helped to officially introduce women into the band, not in terms of singing on the records, because that had been happening already. But when it was time to tour, to promote it, he actually had to get some women in the band to go on the tour, which they had not done before. And so this kind of sets in motion everything that leads up to us being here today. So we got to give it up for Parliament in particular, Neil Bogart of Casablanca Records, who believe in the vision and everything else that happened after that, including Parlette and the Brides of Funkenstein, the women of Parliament-Funkadelic. So this entire book that Mr. Seth Neblett here has put together, my birthday twin, by the way. That's right. Both June 5th. Yep. So a lot of times people don't understand these types of projects can take a really long time. And you worked on this for, not exaggerating, about 20 years.
Yeah, I started, well, this project didn't start off as a book. This project was originally supposed to be a documentary. Right. There was an award-winning documentarian by the name of Paul Justman, who had just released a film called Standing in the Shadows of Motown about the Funk Brothers. And through my mother's attorney, I met Paul. And at the time, he was coming back and forth to Detroit a lot because he was still doing work, promoting and things like that with Standing in the Shadows.
Real quick, let them know who your mother is.
Oh, my mother is Malia Franklin.
Right there on the screen on the left.
Right there.
Perfect time,
yeah, so he tried to shop the idea for a documentary for probably about a year or two, maybe, right, Shirley? And he came back to me, he said, Seth, he said, I think you're gonna need a book. And we're talking about, this is like 2003 we're talking about.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he said, Seth, we think you're gonna need a book. Because even Standing in the Shadows started as a book. And if you've got a book, then you know we might be able to get this done. So that became the journey of trying to find a writer. I wasn't the one that was raising my hand and saying, I want to write this book. We were actually talking to different writers. And when I say we, I mean that I had been doing some other work on other projects with my mother, Malia, with Shirley Hayden, with Jeanette Washington, who was a Parlette, with Dawn Silva, who was a bride of Funkenstein, Lynn Mabry, who was a bride of Funkenstein. And so after not being able to find a writer for maybe about a year, I had moved from Detroit to LA, and I was having dinner with Bootsy and my mother, and Bootsy's my godfather. And you know, I'm griping and talking about, we're never gonna get this book done, and we'll never get this documentary done because we can't get the book done. And Bootsy just looked at me and he said, well, you've already started the work. You just write it.
What was that moment like? Because the idea of being an author, if you've never been one.
Right. I've never written anything.
Wow.
And he said, you're the perfect person to write it. He said, because you know the story, you know the players, you know the truth, and you know when somebody is trying to bullshit you. So you're the perfect person to write it. So my journey on that journey started around 2005. And then I think I probably finally put the pen away, so to speak, in 2019. And here we are, 2025, and it's reality. Yeah,
So yeah, it can take a while but the thing is, have anybody here read the book already? Okay. You don't count it. So I'm not gonna spoil anything, but I read the book. I've read a whole lot of books. I mean, I love reading, music, biographies, autobiographies, oral histories, all of that. This is one of the top 3 books that I've ever read about music. Definitely. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes you get books, they're good, but you feel like they didn't give you enough. Sometimes you get books, I'll give you an example. My favorite rapper of all time is LL Cool J. In 1997, he put out an autobiography. It was good, but he made the mistake, for me at least, of not giving enough information about the music. He gave good information about his personal life, excellent, but it wasn't enough balance. Like his second album, Bigger and Different, I'm Bad, I Need Love. He barely even mentioned that in the book. I'm like, come on, man, this is the one that made you big. So some books miss out on the balance. And in your book, you go beyond just the obvious. Like typically, if you think about singers, musicians, most people think of 2 things, man. They think of them in the studio, making the music, and being on stage performing. So you have that covered, but you also cover the tour bus, the hotel, what it was like at their mama house, the office where the business is taken care of. So you cover a lot of different spectrums to give a more complete look at it, a deeper look into it. So that's why, it was worth the 20 plus year wait.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was like, man, for real? Oh, wow, what? Oh, man. And I knew some of the stories.
Yeah.
Because one of the ladies who's not on the cover, who's not one of the main 5 features, but who's in the band is Sheila Horn.
Yes.
I've had a friend, Shirley, I haven't talked to her in a little bit.
Yeah.
But she, back in 2000s, let me on the tour bus, and, we stayed friends and everything. But she is involved just like the other ladies who were not directly involved.
Right.
But, so I heard some of the stories that you tell, a couple of the big ones too.
Yeah.
But even then, I was still like, what?
Yeah.
What? Oh man. It's like, so that's why I say it's once you read it, you will be very satisfied.
Yeah.
With like, man, this is worth it.
Yeah, and let me say that, Sheila was actually just at our Detroit book signing.
I saw that. I saw that.
And I asked all the women that had been parts of, members of Parliament or members of Brides of Frankenstein to participate in the book.
Right.
And, not everybody, for their own personal reasons, wanted to participate.
Right.
And which I think was kind of a travesty for them, because you have a book where everybody's talking about you, and you don't have a voice to say anything or to defend yourself or say, well, maybe this is why I did this, or this is why I acted this way. And, I really tried to impress upon all of the women that, you should all have a voice in this. Now, the thing was that, they had different reasons. Some didn't want to do it because of where they fit into the story. some had other reasons, but I think it was a travesty for them, because I would always tell all of them, you're gonna be in the book, whether you're in the book or not, you're gonna be in it. Because you can't stop other people from being from you being a part of their story.
Right.
So they're gonna still talk about you, and you're still gonna be in the book. The difference is you won't have a voice. And that, to me, is a little.
Yeah, I tried to tell Sheila, because she says she's writing her own book, which, I'm sure that would be interesting. But I tried to say, you need to be a part of it, because that can help launch your book.
Hey,
You know.
but you know what? I'll just be honest. There were so many people that just thought this book would never even come out.
Yeah.
This book not gonna come out. Seth been working on this book forever. That book not gonna come out.
It's finally out.
Then that book comes out, and when it comes out, I mean it comes out.
Right.
And now it's like, well, sorry.
Well, here we are.
You
Well,
jumped off the train.
maybe they can participate in what you have going forward.
Yes.
Maybe they'll see it differently now.
Hopefully.
Right. So now, one thing I'm interested in finding out, when I didn't know this until I actually opened the book, and I see Miss Ayanna Contreras did the foreword. Now, I used to listen to her here in Chicago on Vocalo Radio on Thursdays, Reclaim Soul, and it reminded me a lot of the radio shows I did when I was in college. I used to do funk and R&B, 70s, early 80s. And when I heard that hers was a little more soul oriented, but still just stuff from that era, I was like, okay, this is nice. So I'm like, what? Okay, wait, let me dig into this. So how did you all connect for her to be a part of it?
I know Jessica is probably our missing link, right?
Yeah.
So Jessica Hopper is an important player at the press that published this book, and we're both friends. And so I know that she probably suggested me to you. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't plan this, but
No. It just happened that way. Jessica Hopper, at least for this book being on the University of Texas Press, is the whole reason that it happened. I believe she saw an excerpt that I had posted on mine. I would just post little stuff because everybody never thought the book was gonna come out. I'm like, no, the book is real. Here, let me post that excerpt. It's a real book.
I read all of excerpts too. I went back and read them again after I read the book, see if it was anything was missing.
And I believe Jessica saw one and contacted me on Instagram and was like, do you have a publisher? No, not yet. I was about to self-publish it probably. She said, well, can I interest you in talking to a publisher? And that's what happened. That's how I ended up on the University of Texas.
Okay.
and then I had done probably right before she reached out to me. I do talking head stuff as well, so I was on a documentary called Women Who Rock that Jessica Hopper produced, and that had Shaka Khan, maybe Staples, different people like that. And so probably she had me in mind because this is something like that where we're really trying to turn things on the side of how you think you understand that musical history. So that would be my guess. I mean,
Either way, it worked.
And I know
It worked. So what was your approach to doing this to even write the foreword? What angle did you come from to say, okay, this is what I'm gonna add to this story?
Well, I definitely didn't want to step on Seth's toes because there's so many aha moments, right? I didn't want to give away the whole ghost. You know what I'm saying? Some of those intros are weird because they're like, they really want to do that. I wanted to make sure to just provide context. So the other part about it is I have a book that I wrote called Energy Never Dies, Afro-Optimism and Creativity in Chicago. And that book does some similar work, but from a Chicago standpoint, where I'm really like tying a lot of things together that if you didn't really understand it, you wouldn't understand the whole spectrum of what's behind the story, right? And so like, what I'm reading it from a person who really understands the music really deeply, but didn't have the historical context of the interpersonal stuff, and so I wanted to like shine light on that. But then also, as a person who's not a man, right, I wanted to speak about it from my perspective, understanding, like maybe I didn't even really understand how the covers of like the Funkadelic albums made me feel. you know what I'm saying, how the women are kind of objectified a little bit, where it doesn't feel as welcoming as maybe I personally would have wanted to feel on the cover. Although Pedro Bell's from Chicago, very talented cat. But like where you actually deal with that in the book, and I wanted to make sure that that was highlighted, where sort of the invisibility of the women and the women's roles in the book is not only peeled back, but it's actually celebrated. I wanted to make sure that with the few pages that I wrote, that I really set you up for that journey from that lens.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, makes sense. Now, one of the subjects that you touch on, with us being in Chicago, the biggest concert that I've ever heard about my entire life, the Funk Fest at Soldier Field, August 26, 1978. Okay, I was 5, so I wasn't there. But I had already had a Parliament album, because the first album I ever got from a record store was Funkadelic versus DuSable Cinema, Life on the Left. And my cousins were heavy into it. Our cousins went to the Funk Fest. I worked with people who say they went. I was out somewhere about a month ago, and an older white lady, she's about 75, and she said, I went to a Parliament-Funkadelic concert at Soldier Field when I was 16. I'm like, what? It was so much fun. Okay, okay. So you touch on that concert. So this lady on the end was on stage that night. Yep. Or that day. That day. Was anybody here in the room? Was anybody at the show? See, they were there. And one thing I've noticed over the years, whenever that concert comes up, anyone who was there, they light up like Christmas trees. Oh man, it looked like it was gonna rain that day. The Taste of Honey opened it up, the Barcades was great, and the Mothership came down. It's like, I've been hearing about this my whole life. I hate it wasn't filmed. So, Shirley, since you were actually there, not just as an attendee, but you were on stage performing, what are your recollections of that particular show?
Well, I was a newbie, still, I'm sorry.
Hello. I was a newbie. I have been with Parliament-Funkadelic for a few months. We did down south. What was it, South Carolina, North Carolina?
Yeah,
Charlotte. And so I'm still trying to find my footing. I'm sorry?
And RFK Stadium in Washington.
Okay. So all the dates and everything. That's why I love them. I can't remember everything. But yeah, still trying to find my footing. It was huge. To be on stage, the stage was, I had never been on stage that large before. To look out into the audience, it was a sea of folk. Something like 60, 70,000 people. It's unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And I was having a moment. I didn't need to see all that, just try and internalize what is going on so that I can get through the show, because I'm trying to find my footing. Legs are frozen. I'm trying to find my footing. We have on our new outfits. Trying to find my footing. I'm hoping that the voice comes out. I'm trying to find my footing. We have some choreography. I hope I can do the choreography. My legs are frozen. But as it turns out, we went out there and killed it. We turned it out. We did. We were a force. The females of Parliament-Funkadelic were a force to be reckoned with. I didn't know the magic that Parliament-Funkadelic had on stage. Yeah, I've been to concerts, went to a lot of P-Funk concerts, but to be on stage was a whole nother animal. So during that period, I was trying to find my footing, and it was a sea of folk, 60, 70,000 in one space. I don't know how they did that.
Yeah, they had a whole article about it in Jet Magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Awesome.
pictures. If you go online and Google, you can find it, and you can see the photos, and you can see all the. It's like wow.
Amazing.
I mean, because like I said, that is like the mythical concert in Chicago history. You know, I've heard about it. I remember one guy told me, he said, "Man, I don't even know how I got home that day." You know? But so just to clarify though, so you were a member of Parliament, and because on the billing it said Parliament-Funkadelic, Bootsy's Rubber Band, Confunction, Barcades, Taste of Honey, and it said the Parlettes, which I don't know how they misspelled that since there was already a record out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to be fair, remember they were calling Parliament, they were originally the Parliaments, then they became Parliament, but people still called them Parliaments forever. So maybe there was some confusion with that.
Yeah. And the Parlettes, you know, they call them parlay.
Yeah, I heard that.
You know, it's a bunch of different, you know, but Parlet.
And so when you all were on the stage, did Parlet do a separate set
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
first?
Yeah, we had our own band.
Yeah.
Our band was unique. Our band was unique. We had all players from Detroit that studied the music. You know, that's a difference. They studied the music. They enjoyed playing their instruments. And we spent a lot of time in rehearsal. You know, even though it was short, Parlet had an album out at the time that had to be worked. We have to work this album.
The first one, Pleasure Principle.
Pleasure Principle. Mm-hmm. And I came in, I guess you could say, at the very beginning of Pleasure Principle. A founding member, female member of Parliament-Funkadelic, Miss Debbie Wright, God rest your soul, Debbie, we love you, honey, was having issues. She was having health issues. And they needed that another female entity to fill that void. And I stepped in and did that. Yeah. Frightening. I had never been on a large stage like that, doing semi-professional gigs in Detroit, you know, local stuff. Local 876, Little Egypts. It was quite a few. But you know, you're honing, you're building your skills. So that's what I was doing, building my skills. So I was ready in a sense, but to be on a major stage like that is a whole nother animal.
And speaking of Pleasure Principle, I have to touch on, I don't even know if any of you all know, I don't know if anybody in P-Funk knows this, but here in Chicago, in the mid-'80s, the song Pleasure Principle became part of Chicago's house music scene.
Heard that.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's a DJ, he just passed away not too long ago, named Lee Collins.
Yeah.
He had a show on WHBK called Disco Madness. And my cousin discovered him in the summer of 1985, and we started listening to him faithfully. As far as I'm concerned, still to this day, the best deep house show in Chicago radio history. WBMX, Hot Mix 5, they get the credit, which is understandable, but they wasn't deep like Lee Collins. And so in January of '86, he started playing this song. And back then, we would make up titles if we didn't know the title. So we just called it Lucky Starship. Somebody called it Starship Enterprise, you know. So one day, I think it might have been about April of '86, I was at my cousin's house, and we actually called the radio station and asked him to play it. And we called it Starship Enterprise. He was like, I know it's called Pleasure Principle. It's by he said Parlay. Okay, So we eventually found out that it was Parliament. But so I went to a record store. There was a record store here on 95th and Jeffrey called, originally it was the Record Box, where I bought Funkadelic as a kid, but then it changed to Great Scott. So I went in Great Scott in '86 one day, and he had this sale, and I ended up getting the Parliament Greatest Hits album. Then I started collecting all the P-Funk albums. And so I went and I got Pleasure Principle. I paid about $10 for it. I flip. The first thing I know is the Sir Knows. I'm like, wait a minute, I know who that is. So then I flip it over, and I see all these names. I'm like, oh, this a P-Funk record. Right. Okay. So I paid about $10 for it. About 2 months later, I went back to get the other Parliament albums. That Pleasure Principle album was $50 because the DJs here, they found out and they started playing it, and it got popular on that scene. Yeah. So that is a collector's item here in Chicago, not just for P-Funk, but also for house.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know if it's like that anywhere else.
I don't know either, but I know I started discovering white labels that had Pleasure Principle on it, that the DJs were using. And the first time I had ever heard of any Pleasure Principle being like this iconic house tune was first days of the internet, you know, doing your little searches. And there was an interview with the DJ. I can't remember what his name was, but they asked him what was like his top 5 house records, and like one of them was Pleasure Principle. And I was like, what? Pleasure Principle?
Yeah.
You know, but Pleasure Principle really in reality was a disco record.
Right.
It was a disco record.
Right.
And it was, you know, I always say that it was a great record, but I think at the time for Parliament, it probably didn't resonate right off with the P-Funk fans because it was so disco. But that had a lot to do with Casablanca.
Correct.
Casablanca Records that Parliament was on was a disco label. It was Donna Summer, it was the Village People, it was people like that. So Parliament, in a way, was to cater to the funk market, but the disco market. And some of it had to do, and a lot of it had to do with my mother looking very Caucasian and singing black before Tina Marie's and stuff like that, that they felt that could be a way that they could cross Parliament over into pop rock. It didn't quite work out like they thought it would, but that was, I think, the thinking of Casablanca.
And I like in your mom's and how she really broke that down too. You know,
Yeah.
that's one of the things you'll see in the book, how everybody kind of gets to go into detail about why certain things happen, why certain records or certain shows or in general, why they turned out the way that they did. That's one of the things that makes the book so great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, I want to do something here real quick. So, back in 1998, there was a series of books. They were oral history books. There's one about the women of Motown. There's one about Sam and Dave. There's one about Sly and Family Stone, which is how a lot of us found out that the infamous concert where there was a riot where they said Sly Stone didn't show up in Grant Park downtown. Well, it turned out that the Mayor Daley at the time kind of hoodwinked everybody. they told the people that Sly was going to perform at 3, and they told Sly to be there at 6. And so when it came 3:30, they told the people, you know, Sly wasn't going to perform, and the riot broke out. 2 of my uncles were actually in that riot. I remember hearing my grandmother talking about it. Years later, my 2 youngest uncles, Charles and Casey. Casey and Charles went to jail messing around with Sly Stone. So these oral history books were great. And there's one on George Clinton and P-Funk. But what's interesting, I think it really is a good lead up to your book, and it shows just what I'm talking about in terms of detail. So there's a part where the guys are talking about the Atomic Dog Tour in 1983. So the women started being a part of the tours in '76. The Atomic Dog Tour was the first one where there were no women on stage with them. It was just the guys. Right? So some of the guys in the band were talking about that. And I just want to read just a little piece to give you an example of the difference between this book and the book we're here for today. So, I'm gonna put these on real quick. You only look. All right. So, Lige Curry, who was the cousin of Mike Hampton, lead guitar player, and Dennis Chambers, the drummer. So, Lige says, you know, the girls were cool, but it got out of hand on the road. You had guys going with the girls, and that domestic thing kind of came in. There was fights all the time that people probably never knew about, but then people probably did. Then Dennis Chambers said, there are a few other female singers who conducted themselves very professionally. And then there was some of them who it was like Peyton Place. They always kept ish going. He said, for me, it was like a blessing when we had no girls. We got along very well when there were no girls. He said, and they all hated each other, it seemed like, except for Dawn and Lynn. Lynn and Dawn were cool with each other. In fact, Dawn was cool, period, with the other girls. He said Jeanette Magruder was cool. Everybody else was just a pain in the ass. And then Jeanette Magruder finally says, all of us were really, really young and jealous, and we had all that stuff going on. I'm reflecting back now on my maturity and saying it was all great, but if you were to have this interview with me back then, I would have said something different. Now, here's the thing. This is a great book. Look at this book. It's about 150 pages, small. Now look at the Mothership Connected book. Okay, I'm gonna hold them up together so you see. All right. Look at that. So, as great as the oral history book was, you used the same format of it being an oral history.
Yeah.
And you go way deeper into these stories. So what they're hinting at in this little book is explored in detail in this Mothership Connected book. So that's why I was like, oh yeah, man, this is, because I love information.
Yeah.
So when you were getting all of these stories, at what point did you say, okay, I'm not going to try to filter any of this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to let them say what they have to say so we can get the full details that may have only been hinted at or heard about prior to this book.
Well, the main reason that this was an oral history is because really this book it's not about Seth.
Right.
And it's not about Seth telling the story or Seth saying, this is how it happened and this is how it went. And I knew it, I had lived it as a kid. So I knew enough information where I could have probably just wrote a book and said, hey, this is what happened. But that was not what I wanted to do. First off, I think it was important for the women's voices to be heard, number one. Number two, if your main 5 subjects are being very real and raw and not filtering their conversation, then the other interviews, George Clinton, Sly Stone, Bootsy Collins, Gary Scheider, Ron Dunbar, every player that was a major player within the story of Parliament and the Brides, I interviewed. Because I was not there, meaning the book was not for me to say, this is the truth, this is a lie, that's not what I came to do. What I came to do myself is take the reader by the hand and take them down this journey, take them down this road, and let the people that lived it tell their versions of the story. Because if there, as you probably read in the book, there are versions that conflict with each other.
Right. That's not how I remember it at all.
Yeah.
This is what happened.
Yeah.
See.
but that's life. That's life. You may remember an event one way, And somebody that was sitting right next to you may remember that event a totally different way. And in their head, they're 100% accurate and 100% true. Just like in your head, you're like, no, that's not how it happened. For me as the author, it wasn't for me to pick a side and say, oh, well, that sounds more like the truth, so I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
I had to put it all in there. But one thing that I did try to do is when I talked about events, I liked to have multiple voices talking about those events. So it really wasn't just one person telling the story. It's like one person might start, like Nallian might start, but then Shirley's gonna chime in and say, well, I remember this element of it. And maybe Ron Dunbar will chime in and say, and yeah, and this is why that happened. So I think the main thing was that because I had lived the life, I knew the questions to ask. I knew the skeleton. I knew the foundation. It wasn't like I was coming into this just learning. You know what I mean? I lived it. I saw it. I saw it. I heard it. You know, ear hustling as a kid. You know, I heard the arguments. I heard the George didn't pay me. I heard all of it. You know, so for me, you know, it was like almost doing, an oral history on your family in a way, you know? And it was just important to, number one, I couldn't sugarcoat it, because if I'm gonna do this, I'm not gonna fake the funk. I'm gonna do it. If we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it. And, you know, so yes, as that one oral history talks about, oh yeah, people were fighting and blah, 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 blah. No, he took a pocket knife and stabbed her in the back on the road.
I had heard that story too.
And you know it's true.
Right, yeah.
Okay?
But I didn't hear it in detail like you put it
Right.
in. I was like, oh, wow.
But I told the story.
Right.
And I told it, I tried to tell it in a visual way where you as the reader felt like you were there. And, you know, so yeah. Oh, yeah, you know, there could be one thing. Oh, yeah, there were a lot of drugs going on. I think that people knew with Parliament-Funkadelic there were a lot of drugs going on. Okay? But the things that they didn't know was like the way that the drugs got infiltrated into the organization. That one of George's right-hand men was an advisor to Fidel Castro. And they were bringing in pink cocaine, pure. That man was also one of the people that when George's publishing got signed away, he owned a big chunk of it. And the Parliament music. No, we're talking about Nene Montez. Armin was one side. Armin owned some of it. Armin Baladian, who used to own Westbound Records. Armin Baladian owned half of it. Nene Montez owned the other half of it. So, you know, for me, if I'm going to tell this story, I have to tell it, and it would be a disservice to my mother and a disservice to these women to not tell it like it really was, but to let them tell it in their own voice. Yeah.
So Shirley, I have to ask you,
Yes, love.
so we have five, you're one of the five main women.
Yes.
What can you tell us about the other women? So, for example, Debbie
To the
Wright.
jugular.
Debbie Wright is one of my favorite members
My
because
sister love, I loved her.
I had that Parliament Live People on Earth tour album when I was a little kid. My brother-in-law gave it to me, and I just remember the picture of her doing this.
She was just so beautiful.
And seeing
Truly with her.
concert footage years later of her on stage, oh, she was bad. She
Oh,
could
she was awesome.
dance and
She was awesome. She had the full picture. She had it all. She really did. But Debbie was that undertow took Debbie.
Yeah.
The undertow being drugs
Yeah.
took Debbie. And so there were some mental health issues there. But I was dating her brother, Jim Wright.
Who played drums on the Pleasure Principle
He
album?
did. He was the original drummer, and I believe he helped put together the band, Parliament band. It wasn't Debbie's band.
Right.
It was Parlette's band.
Right.
Malia had joined the group, but yeah, it was. Debbie was a sweetie pie, even in her mental illness. That soul, she had the soul. It was something you couldn't take from her. You know, coming from her gospel background, her mom and siblings. She was a sweetie pie to the end.
Yeah.
To the end.
Yeah.
And Debbie definitely wanted this book to come out. She wanted her story told. As painful as her story is, she wanted the world to know her story. And so we would do a disservice by not allowing that space for her to tell her story. Jeanette Perkins, Jeanette Washington at the time.
Matter of fact, real quick, this is my favorite picture in the book.
Oh, yeah.
This picture of Debbie and Jeanette.
Debbie
Yeah.
gave me that picture.
I
Yeah.
love this picture because it's like they so little and they so young.
Yes,
You know, this is
babies.
from that first tour
Yeah.
when they were promoting Mothership Connection and Clones of Dr. Funkenstein in '76.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a great picture. I
To
love it.
see Debbie on stage, to see Jeanette. Jeanette was very lucky. Debbie brought Jeanette in. Jeanette did not have the professionalism, let's say, that Malia had. Debbie was a natural. She was a natural. Jeanette was still, you know, trying to find her way, so to speak. She was angry, and you could see the envy. And when I came in, oh my God. You know, they didn't want me. You know, Debbie wasn't, like I said, Debbie was, okay, Debbie had to rest for a while. But I came in with Malia, who I looked at as the leader of Parliament. And then there was Jeanette. Jeanette, no. Even though I befriended Jeanette, I had to. You know, I wanted to get along with the women. You know, I'm the new kid on the block. I'm trying to find my way. And whatever advice you could give me, whatever it is that you can show me how to work this machine, I was open to it because I wanted to be a part. I wanted to learn this, but she didn't want to show me anything. You know, we're doing choreography. Okay, so you know, you're bopping, you're moving to the right, dot, 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 dot. Okay, you didn't move to the right. Shit. Dot, 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 dot. You moved to the right. Oh, she decides to go to the left. Do it to her. Well, that wasn't, okay, what's going on? Okay, so I realized that it was a control issue. It was more control than anything. You know, the way you look, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you dress, and like none of it. The Brides of Funkenstein, they were a separate entity, so to speak. The Valley Girls, you know.
Yeah, they were from California.
They were from California,
From Detroit.
you know, from Slides.
Slides girls.
Yeah, those are Slides girls. And so they came with a little clout. That's what I saw. And he came with a little cloud, and that was all good. Lynn she was so sweet, you know, very airy, and, you know, the head was, I love everybody. Dawn was a different character. It may have a lot to do with her age.
Yeah, because she was a little older than.
Don't tell her that. Don't say that. But yes, she was a little more mature, and she was studying me. She was a viper. She would slither.
That's Dawn on the right in the picture, next to Shirley.
She was slithering around. Oh, where are you coming from? How old are you? Oh yeah, you have 3 more years in the business. You know, that type of thing. You're wearing my costumes. When Parlette is not on the road, you know, we're leaving our costumes. Well, somehow, Dawn, I see a picture of Dawn in my costumes. But you don't care for me, but you like the way I looked. You like my style. But she was a viper. Lynn was very sweet. Satori, you know, Satori came from, I think she came in from New York. She was doing some Broadway, off-Broadway stuff.
Jeanette Magruder at the
Jeanette
time.
Magruder,
So you look
yeah.
at the records, that's who she started.
Mm-hmm. She was doing some off-Broadway stuff in New York. I didn't meet Satori until the Parliament-Funkadelic, the whole thing. Sheila Amuka Kelly.
Sheila Horn.
Yeah, Sheila Horn. She had that, you know, flighty personality, beautiful voice, but there was something going on with Sheila. I don't know, maybe it had a lot to do with her having a relationship with George. I don't know.
You know what's funny about that? She told me because she never messed with George. So I'm reading the book and I'm like, oh, okay, so that's why you didn't.
Oh, that's terrible. That is so bad.
She denied that. So
Yeah. Well, yeah. I would. Because she turned into a complete idiot. And really, in this relationship with George Clinton, you couldn't say anything to her because she was the prima donna. Yeah. But that was the gist of the women. This is going to be her. And then you had the women that were peripheral. You know, Jessica came later.
Jessica Cleaves.
Beautiful, beautiful
Earth, Wind, and
spirit.
Fire and the Friends of Distinction.
Yes.
Matter of fact, on Keep Your Head to the Sky by Earth, Wind, and Fire, that's her hitting those high notes.
Yes,
Philip
Jessica.
Bailey. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there were 2 sisters that came in and joined Parlette, Gwen Dozier and Janice Evans. Janice Evans, let's see, who came first? Janice Evans. Yeah, Janice came first. She did a stint with us, California stint. She became pregnant. She took some time off. Her sister filled in for Gwen Dozier. So Gwen did a short stint. Jealousy, envy. That's the bottom line. Jealousy, envy, women not comfortable in their own skin. I had some skills. I came to the organization with skills. I was married at 18, widowed at 19. So it wasn't a pretty picture, to say the least. It wasn't pretty. I had a daughter, small baby, 5 months, 6 months old. She's sitting over there, Shirley. Raise your hand, boo.
Oh, no
So-
wonder you know so much. She said that.
It was difficult, you know, being a mom and having a small child. It was very difficult because you're just running the streets. No. Yeah, I was hanging out in some places that I had no business, but how would I learn? I had to go out. I could not be afraid to step out, which the masses were trying to belittle, make me fearful of what it was that I was doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. As you
It's a
all
lot.
read, you'll see there's a lot going on in
There's
this
a lot
book.
going on.
And one thing that was important for me to establish in this book as well is, yes, this is a book about music history, this is a book about black history, but it's also a book about women's studies. Because it was very important for me to examine the relationships that the women had with each other,
Yes.
that the relationships that women had with the men, and the relationships that the women had with each other because of the men. At a time when there's a lot of misogyny going on. You're talking about an era where we're just coming out of blaxploitation. And you had a lot of black men at that time that had that very pimpish kind of way. I mean, George Clinton says Dr. Funkenstein is the ultimate space pimp. So if you're one of Dr. Funkenstein's women, then what does that make you?
Right.
I mean, when you look at things like that, the album cover for Pleasure Principle, beautiful album cover. They paid the guy, a Japanese artist by the name of Sushi Nagaoka.
Yeah, he did the Earth, Wind, and Fire album covers, All in All, and
He did
Radio,
Yellow, Electric Light
cover.
Orchestra,
Sun.
and they paid him all of this money, and he does this beautiful portrait of Parlett in this spaceship. But what you don't know, what I found out, is I actually found a book. There was a book on Sushi's art.
Yeah.
And Sushi talked about how his direction was to draw them in a space whorehouse.
Right there at the left.
And that if you look at it, there are a lot of subliminal images in there of private parts.
Oh, wow. That's a study.
And that was his direction. Draw them in a space brothel. So that kind of, and the album is called Pleasure Principle. You know, so, but that was that misogynistic, sexist, you know, kind of thinking back then, you know.
And in all fairness too, and this is, Lynn tells a story in the book that kind of touches on this. The relationships between men and women in regular society and men and women in entertainment, not quite the same thing.
Very different.
You know, so they were in a world where when they interacted with women, it was women looked at them differently and acted differently than maybe they did with the guy who worked at the grocery store or the barber or anybody else.
Yeah.
You know, so they were kind of going, even with the Pedro Bell images, they were kind of going off of their world.
Yeah, it was their
You
world.
know.
Yeah,
And how they were interacting with women.
definitely. And you know, I mean, it was a sign of the times. It was a part of, you know, what it was. But I also like to, you know, keep in mind that these women were all between, at this time when all this is going on, you're talking like they're between 19 and 27.
And they looked good.
You know, they're young, they're young girls. And they're dealing with they are a very small sorority and a very big fraternity of men. You know, you've got this pressure cooker of fame. I can't say fame and fortune, but fame, drugs, rock and roll, sex, all of it going on and being amplified to the 100th degree in the biggest black group in the world at the time. I mean, you could go on the black charts and you'd see 4 songs on the charts, all coming from Parliament-Funkadelic artists. And keep in mind that all of these artists are still members of Parliament-Funkadelic. Boosie's still a Funkadelic. The Brides are still Funkadelics. Parlette is still Funkadelic. And then you got Parliament and Funkadelic. And you could go on a, you know how the Jet used to have the top singles and the top albums at the back of the magazine? You could go on that thing, and in that top 20, there'd be 3 or 4 Parliament things. Boom, 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 boom. You know, at the time, the only black organization that had done something like that was like Motown.
Right.
But you have to keep in mind that with Parliament-Funkadelic, they're all members of the group. It's not like Motown where everybody is either you're a Miracle or a Temptation or you're a Vandello. They're not only just doing Parlette and the Brides, they're coming back and singing on all the Parliament-Funkadelic shows because their voices are on all of that too. So, you know, it's quite demanding.
Speaking of that, I meant to mention this to you before, but I have to mention it now. There's one story in the book that Dawn tells where the timeline can't quite be right.
Okay.
So she says that Disco to Go, Brides of Frankenstein, top 10 hit, and George was about to release One Nation Under a Groove. And the record company guy asked George to hold off on it because they want to push Disco to Go to #1. That can't be right because One Nation was actually out before Disco to Go.
I don't know, but I know Lynn and Dawn both told that same story. So I don't know what that conversation might have been. I don't know if maybe they had talked to the guy. Maybe it was, let's release Disco to Go first and then put out One Nation Under a Groove. I'm not sure. But what I do know is that when Dawn started telling the story, Lynn started chiming in. I don't, you know, like they were there,
Right.
talking in the studio when all of this was happening. So I don't know. They may. I'm not
Matter
sure.
of fact, One Nation was at #1
Mhm.
the week Disco to Go entered the chart.
Okay.
So that's my research.
Okay. So maybe it was a conversation of releasing Disco to Go first.
Or the only thing I think maybe they were talking about Aqua Boogie and not
Maybe it was Aqua Boogie. Maybe it
because
was Aqua
One
Boogie.
Nation was before Aqua Boogie came after.
Yes, maybe it was Aqua Boogie. I don't
Right. So maybe they just were thinking of the wrong song.
know. Yeah.
But yeah, so One Nation was already out. Matter of fact, One Nation was out when they did the concert at Soldier Field
Yeah.
because they had the One Nation flag.
Oh yeah. Mhm. And Bryce wasn't even out.
Right. So that's the only
So it
thing.
might have been Aqua Boogie.
Right. Because, I mean, people's memories get a little foggy. I've learned that from talking. I've talked to artists who they didn't even remember which album came first. They didn't remember which song was on which album. And that happens,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
could
but
have
to be
definitely.
frank, you record a bunch of songs, and they might not all wind up coming out in succession of how they were recorded in the first place.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to ask everybody up here, what was, without trying to give too much away, what was the most shocking story for you? For you, it would be in doing the research, but for you two ladies, for when you actually got the book and you read a story maybe that you didn't know before, that really shocked you, like, wow, really? Because they're two for me, but I want to know what they are for you.
So I wasn't there. So all of the interpersonal stuff was very new to me. What I loved about it, because I don't really want to get super sensational about it, because, whatever. I loved about it was how much time you spent on what I call post-Motown Detroit, meaning after 1967, that period from 1967 all the way up through 1976. You spent a lot of time on it so that it doesn't feel like it opened up with Mothership Connection. It feels like it opened up with I Want to Testify, which I think is an under talked about period in Detroit. And from the perspective of your mother specifically, I thought that was really, really powerful and enlightening because, I don't know, I always feel like Chicago and Detroit were like sister cities, musically and every other way.
Okay. Shirley, what about you? What story jumped out at you that maybe you didn't No.
Well, I find it fascinating the relationship that the women that are involved in Mothership Connected had with their mothers. I find that fascinating. One story sticks out for me is the relationship that Lynn Mabry had with her mom.
And there's a nice picture of the two of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Her mother was a free spirit, and that's how she raised Lynn. You know, no boundaries. Dawn seemed to have come from a more strict, being a military baby, as you could say. Her background was somewhat strict. She was very militant, Black Panthers, yada, yada, yada.
That story right there, I was like, what?
Yeah, that one. And then Slide rescued her. That was a fascinating story.
Yeah, that I was
That
like,
was
whoa.
fascinating. Yeah. I had a hard time telling my story. I wanted people to know, you know, that it was not an easy road. My father was a vocalist, mother was a homemaker, but neither wanted me to go into music, dance, nothing. I wanted to attend a music conservatory, but they didn't know anything about a music school. Now, Malia had gone to a conservatory, and I found that really fascinating when I met her, that her mother was her cheerleader, so to speak. And whatever it seemed that Malia wanted as far as her career goals, her mother supported her in that. I didn't have that support. You know, like I said, I was married at 18, widowed at 19, so I got my head knocked. It wasn't an easy road. And I had a small baby. So I'm fighting my parents to be on purpose.
Well, we definitely appreciate you opening up and
I'm
telling
still
that
on
story,
purpose.
too.
Thank you, honey. I appreciate it. Yeah. Wasn't easy. And it's still not easy. It's not easy. But it's getting better
That's good.
because I'm comfortable now in my own skin. So, you know, once you become comfortable with self, when you begin to learn self, then, you know, the music comes naturally. Yeah.
So Seth, for you, what was the most shocking story for you?
There were a couple of things that were shocking. Talking to the business people was very, very interesting. Talking to the women that ran the offices, talking to the road managers, talking to Ron Dunbar, who at the time was one of George's right-hand men, talking to Tom Vickers, who was the publicist.
There's some excellent Tom Vickers interviews on YouTube
Yes.
as well. You go and check him out. He has some really good information that he puts out there.
Yeah. And talking to them was very interesting because they could give you what George's strategy was. And that was something that a lot of the artists didn't really know. What's the strategy? You know, how, the perfect example, when I interviewed Ron Dunbar, who was pretty much the co-president of Bang Incorporated and a music producer and writer that produced a lot of the stuff, especially Parlette stuff. I interviewed him, and then probably about a year later, I interviewed Tom Vickers, the publicist. And both of them, interestingly enough, said the same thing to me when I asked them about Parlette. Well, tell me, you know, what it was as far as Parlette. And both of them said, well, originally, we were selling your mother. We were selling Malia. because Malia looked white and she could sing. And at the time, you know, I asked them about the other two, which was at the time Debbie and Jeanette, and they said we didn't care who she was with. We didn't care what two girls
They
were
were
with
better
her. But that was what George had put kind of in, you know, this is the plan. You know, we're selling Malia. And a lot of that had to do with Neil Bogart at Casablanca.
Right.
Okay? Because Neil Bogart, who was the president of Casablanca, was interested in my mother as a solo artist. Okay? George, there's a whole story about when George is in LA, my mother is playing a gig on the Sunset Strip, and George goes and gets Neil Bogart and takes him down to the club. You gotta see this girl, you gotta see this girl. And at the time, George was trying to get record deals for Parliament and the Brides of Funkenstein. And Neil was very specific. He said, well, whatever group is gonna be on be on Casablanca, Malia has to be in it. George originally went to Neil Bogart with the Brides of Funkenstein. And even according to Don Silva, if that would have happened, the brides would have been Malia Franklin, Lynn Mabry, and Dawn Silva. And then, you know, Debbie and Jeanette would have either continued with Parliament or done a thing as Parlette, because they had already started recording some stuff, Debbie and Jeanette, as Parlette. But, so hearing people, you know, that probably hadn't talked to each other in 40 years say the exact same thing, this was George's plan. That was shocking to me. The other thing that was probably more shocking than anything was another business person, a guy who was manager by the name of Bruce Peterson. Bruce Peterson told a story in the early 90s when my mother was Ice Cube tried to get my mother a record deal. Well, not tried, basically had my mother a record deal through Sylvia Rome with Atlantic. And he said that, I mean, Sylvia Rome was ready to do it. She was gonna fly us to New York. Ice Cube, who my mother had been working with, she had started working with Death Row Records in the early 90s with Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and all those artists. That's how they got a lot of that Parliament sound. My mother was responsible for introducing Dr. Dre to Roger Troutman, which became Tupac California Love. My mother was responsible for bringing Bootsy Collins to Parliament-Funkadelic. If it hadn't been for Malia, Bootsy would have never come to Parliament-Funkadelic. She's responsible for Walter Juni Morrison starting to produce, which brought One Nation Under a Groove, Aqua Boogie, Not Just Knee Deep.
Ohio players.
From the Ohio Players, you know. A session musician, David Lee Spragley, who did the music for Atomic Dog. You know, so one thing that I have to stress when it comes to my mother is that if it hadn't been for Malia Franklin, every hit, every single hit record, except for I Want to Testify, that Parliament, Funkadelic, or George Clinton had as a solo artist was done with a writer, producer, or musician that was brought by Malia Franklin. And, you know, I have to be very bold in saying that if there had been no George Bootsy partnership, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about Mothership Connection. There wouldn't have been no Mothership Connection. And that's just real. That's just facts. And what I love about this book is it's not just my mother saying it, it's Bootsy saying it.
Right.
It's George saying Malia Franklin was the best talent scout funk music ever had. And that's true.
Yeah. All right, so I want to give time for Q&A. Anyone has any questions? This gentleman here. Okay.
This is just a left field question about the social field concert. And I was just curious, in your opinion, why Texas Honey was fit to open since they want capital on their discovery. I didn't really get the connection with them. Yeah, it was kind of odd, I thought.
maybe just they had a hot record. Boogie Oogie Oogie was a hit, you know. And so, yeah.
But you know though, what I found doing research, some of those big festivals, they would mix funk and disco.
Yeah.
Like there's one from '79 where you got P-Funk, Barcades, but you got Sister Sledge,
Yeah, GQ.
Yeah.
GQ, and you know. So yeah, sometimes they
Except for
just.
the commercial aspect, because they were on the radio and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were
the
dropped.
big hits.
Plus, I think also too at the time, a lot of people just looked at it as black artists. They maybe didn't think of separating who's funk, who's disco,
Yeah.
who's both.
Yeah,
They just went with who had the hot records out. Let's get them on the show.
yeah.
So
If I can interject real quick, if anyone is interested in the book, we're selling them in the bookstore. The bookstore is open until about 5 p.m.
Okay. Thank you.
all right, get this gentleman right here.
So what do you think the influence of this funk music had on Brazilian
I can't answer that.
On
question.
Brazilian
You
funk?
can.
No, I don't. I don't know much Brazilian funk, so I can't answer that. Honestly.
Do you have a specific artist?
Just more of a genre. So this says, we're talking about how the influence of funk and disco and house. There's similar influences of funk, disco, and house in South Africa,
That Afrobeat.
Afrobeat in West Africa,
Yeah.
and Brazilian funk in Brazil. So I wasn't sure if you guys had
I haven't checked out any Brazilian funk, so I can't say. This lady right here, and then we'll go to these two.
Was there any discussions regarding taking action against George Clinton for not sharing profits that he received with the ladies? I mean, because I think there should have been, in my opinion, based on what I've heard.
Well, you know, that can be sticky because, first of all, only 3 women in Parliament-Funkadelic had contracts. And that was Lynn Mabry, Dawn Silva, and Mallory Franklin. And Gary Scheider, who's the guitarist for P-Funk, said it kind of best in the book. He said, if George needs you for something, he will lock you up with paperwork. As far as Parlette was concerned, he needed Mallory Franklin. So she's the one that had to be under contract. And, but this is the thing, is that unfortunately, most of the rights to all of that music, George doesn't even own. George doesn't own any of that stuff. He's fighting for it. He's fighting to try to get it back because it belongs to record companies and it belongs to publishers' houses and it belongs, the last I heard, he lost the Warner Brother Funkadelic albums to his attorney because he didn't pay him. And so he doesn't own any of that stuff.
Is that what's keeping him on the road? Is that what's keeping him working?
Yeah, you know,
He
I
has
think
to
George
work.
has to work.
He has to work.
He has to work, and yes, those are the things that yeah. I mean, when you think about it, George was never, business wasn't his strong suit.
How old is he now, sir?
About 84.
He
Yeah,
has to work. That's
yeah, he's got to work.
so sad.
You know, business wasn't George's strong suit, and he didn't have people around him that really knew how to handle something that massive. You know, I mean, really, the last time that George had any real management was when he had backstage management. Backstage management but they were real artist managers. They were the ones that got George Clinton all of those record deals with all of those different companies. They're the ones that got all that money from Casablanca and got the Mothership built and got all of that stuff done. And then once George, you know, about 1978, George said, he used to call him backstab manager.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Pedro Bell
He
put
used to
that
call him backstab.
on the one day. He put backstab dismanagement.
Yeah,
on the one day.
but this is the thing though, and this is no disrespect to the people that he brought in, like Archie Ivan, but they didn't know how to run nothing that big. And so, you know, when you're in that game, sometimes you have to have players in that game that know the game to make sure that things are in your, you know, and if you don't, if you have people that are more novice or are not really professionals, they don't know how to play a game not as big as what Parliament-Funkadelic became.
I was told to get in line when it came to, when I finally got the nerve to talk to someone professionally, a lawyer that was popular at the time, can't call her name right now, told me to get in line because everybody was suing him. So that was disheartening. Oh, wow, I'll never get to the end of this. So you leave it alone. You leave it alone.
But one thing is that they don't have, that nobody could take was their story.
Couldn't take that. Yeah. They tried to stamp the women out in the 90s. They tried very hard. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. What was the other award?
Grammy Lifetime
The
Achievement.
Grammy.
Yeah, that was more recent.
But there was no mention.
Of the women.
Now, you know, for years we have been watching the, you know, the funk news, entertainment news, and everybody was receiving some sort of accolade within the group, male. Those that really had no position, not really, in the Funkadelic were also receiving accolades and so forth, but not one woman. And that just didn't make sense. So I tried to, myself, because I've always been a advocate for the women. Myself first, I learned that, then the women. We need to come together in order to take a stand. But they didn't want to take a stand. That's why they're not here today, because they didn't want to take a stand. It's not that they thought their story was unimportant. They didn't want to take the stand. It was too much work. So that leaves you fighting alone. But when they were inducted, I said, I can't take this. This is real. I need to know why. Why is it that you're trying to erase the women from the history? You hear the voices, you know some of the names. Why are you doing this?
Well, I think with the
Second
Rock and Roll
line.
Hall of Fame, the key to understanding who was inducted and who wasn't, it kind of goes back to this album. Because what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame basically did was they used this as kind of the dividing line. So if you were on this album or in the band prior to it and made a significant contribution, you had a chance to be inducted. If you were not on this album, if you came later, then they didn't look at you. Only exception being Junie Morrison, because he was writing and producing, you know, Knee Deep One Nation. But they basically ignored everybody, men and women, who came after this, because they kind of looked at it, I guess, like these folks built it to where this spaceship could take off, and then everybody else, once it got rolling, then you all came along and made your contributions. But we're gonna go with these folks because they set it up.
I got something to say about that.
Okay.
But what about the fact that Natalie Franklin and Debbie Wright are on that album?
Well, good. Okay, good question.
And many albums before that.
Right. But that also goes back to something else that gets brought up in the book, which is credits. Maya Franklin's name is not listed on this album. She's only listed on Chocolate City, the ones before this. Chocolate City, she got Thanks and Debbie Wright. But most of those albums, there's nobody listed. You know, this was really the first one where a significant amount of women are listed as contributors. But even with that, they're listed under extraterrestrial voices and good time hand clappers. And what you have to understand is back then in the music industry, it was very common for record producers to hire professional background singers to enhance the records. Regardless of who, a good example would be the Spinners. If you listen to some of the Spinners songs, you hear women singing as prominently as the men, but they're not members of the Spinners. So when the Spinners got inducted, the women who helped make those records were not included. And that's kind of, that's something that kind of happened commonly. And also, like, if you look at, say, like the OJs. So we know the OJs being 3 guys, but originally it was 5. So one of the original members, a guy named Bobby Massey, he was a founding member. He sang on everything they did up until they got real hit records. He's not on Backstabbers, he's not on any of that. He left in '72. So the public generally doesn't really know him, but they inducted him because he was one of the members who was there in that struggle and got it to that point. And even with Parliament-Funkadelic, some of the members who were in the band prior to this did not get inducted. Ty Ross, the original Funkadelic rhythm guitar player, not inducted. Tyrone Lampkin, drummer, played on America Eats Is Young and Cosmic Slop, and then came back later, not inducted. So a lot of people think, I gotta tell you this. Jerome Bradley, the drummer, on Tear the Roof Off the Sucker. Back in like 2013, he had a new album coming out, so he was doing a lot of interviews. And he said in one interview that he got a call from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame letting him know he was gonna be inducted. And his reaction was, does George know about this? Because he ended up leaving and doing mutiny and, you know, all that stuff. They told him George Clinton had no say-so in who was or was not inducted. That was on us. We decided who was inducted. So a lot of people, including members of the band, think George told them, okay, this is who you put in.
Well, I know what we were told. We were told that the reason that they weren't inducted was that they had to be in the band 20 years or more. 20 years or more by the induction, which was 1997. So if you go back 20 years, that's 1977.
Right.
The original Parlettes and the original Brides were in the group by then, recording their own albums by then. That's just what we were told.
Who said that?
This was somebody at the Rock Hall. Said, you gotta be in the group 20 years or longer. And so.
You know what though, that sounds like you call like AT&T or Verizon or something, and you talk to one customer service rep, they tell you one thing, you talk to different, they tell you something else. You're like, man, y'all don't even know what y'all talking about. Because that doesn't make any sense for everybody.
Yeah.
You know.
Nobody has a straight answer.
Yeah, so.
But the reality is, I feel like, I'm not sure why you're trying to defend the whole practice of it, but the reality is, the reason why this book exists is because every time somebody has these P-Funk retrospectives, they leave the women out, or the women are in there for 15 seconds, and when you listen to those records, they are the sauce that makes those records sound the way they do, especially from that record on, but those earlier records as well. They were part of that sonic palette. You hear those registers, and without it, it wouldn't be the same. This isn't the same as the Sigma Sweethearts. God bless Barbara Ingram and all of them in Philadelphia. This isn't the same thing, although they should be inducted on their own for their contribution to rock music. I'm saying these people were in the group, they were touring with the group, they were performing with the group for all these years, and they are rendered almost anonymous in all of these stories, and that has been corrected in this book, but that's not the end of the story.
We're gonna have to do 1 or 2 more questions. Okay. Because we want to make sure you all get an opportunity to get your book signed.
Okay. Real quick, my first question is, hey, did you provide vocals on Motor Booty Effect?
Yes.
No, that's one of the
My favorite album of all time, regardless of artists.
I mean, Mothership Connection is a classic. I get where he's going with it, but it might arguably might not be the best P-Funk album. I know the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame arguably, but Motor Booty Affair with that bottom with the women off the chain. Man,
You ain't gonna get no argument from me on that. That's my all-time favorite album, period.
My first recording was One Nation.
One Nation.
George was completing, near the end of completing One Nation. And when I got the job, he needed more backup vocals. He needed more hand claps. And so that's how I came in with backup vocals, more backup vocals and hand claps. And Motor Booty Affair was my second that winter. It was winter, wasn't it? Fall, winter. That was my second recording. And that was a large group of people recording that. But the women were very prominent on that album.
Oh yeah, real quick, the reason why I brought up the background vocals thing is because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, those folks, they're not heavy P-Funk fans, so they're not gonna dig as deep as we would. So they just going off regular music industry stuff, because even with so many people being left out, they still had 15 members inducted, which is way more than anybody else. So in their minds, they like, well look, we just gonna go off what you got on these records. So we don't see these names until a certain point, then we're gonna go with these folks who we saw more.
Well, whatever happened to the group
I don't know. Godmama just kind of, you know, really Godmama was kind of caught up in the Uncle Jam Records fiasco. All of that was part of it, even though Godmama had their own thing. But you have to understand that was also a time where Bootsy started kind of indulging in freebasing, and a lot of stuff was happening. So Godmama just really got lost in the shuffle. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Betty Davis,
Mhm.
she never sang with them.
No.
Betty Davis. Oh, Betty Davis.
Yeah, no, she didn't. No.
But she was a Bootsy, yes.
No.
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 No, she was her own. She just had a similar vibe, but she was on her own.
Yeah.
You know, the drummer from Slide played on her records, Greg Erico. So there was that connection with that, but not with people.
Well, you all, I want to thank you for joining us today. Can we give one round?
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
All right.
So for anyone that has a book, I want to give you an opportunity to just line up and maybe just get your autographs. Line up there.